The state's criminal act of obstruction of justice via criminal defamation, kidnapping by entity engaged in federal group stalking and monitoring with intent to obstruct justice via criminal summoning, criminal assertion of false allegations, criminal defamation, harassment, and the exercise of fictitious authority under and by abuse of the law by the public entity that is engaged in criminal monitoring, including the Ontario Police Department, Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, the San Bernardino Superior Court operating under the LPS Act, and the people of the state, including TRACEE Banks at the facilitating venue of Woodside Senior Apartments, where the entity committed kidnapping commencing May 29, 2025 at or around 8:45 p.m. until June 3, 2025 until approximately 2:39 p.m. as a means of targeting in order to obstruct justice, as the entity committed kidnapping inside of a hospital in order to defame, which aids in the entity's criminal purpose to render evidence against it as illegitimate and to accomplish theft of personal, real, and intellectual property that rightly belongs to me, Erica Lorraine Spencer, and has been stolen via fraud and criminal monitoring by the state of California. The following documentation is captured at third-party facilitating venue, Woodside Senior Apartments, located at 408 West G Street, Ontario, California, 91762, at 7:23 p.m. on May 29, 2025, and it includes the initial moments when the defendant, TRACEE Banks, license 9HUZ740, enters into the apartment, Unit 51, and makes a series of statements alluding to the ultimate purpose of the kidnapping that precipitates from this first attempt to maliciously implicate the issue of mental health in order for the entity acting via the Ontario Police Department to commit an unlawful seizure of my person and assert authority under the Welfare and Institutions Code Section 5150, while the federal offense of gang stalking, referred to as federal group stalking and monitoring, is underway, which is executed here as the malicious act of criminal summoning by the people of the state, which is what TRACEE Banks represents, in her role as a third party targeting in concert with the state, and is fully supported in a body of evidence preceding this iteration of the pattern of conduct by the entity that engages in ceaseless targeting with the Ontario Police Department, whom TRACEE Banks summoned on May 29, 2025. This first kidnapping attempt lacked the necessary ingredient of asserting that physical violence occurred in her manufactured statements to the Ontario Police Department regarding foreign topics never in existence, such as medication and mental illness, which is her typical means of harassment and defamation, as she targets in concert with the entity, including the Ontario Police Department, at the apartment where the entity is documented quite heavily. However, there is no substance to Banks's defamatory speech, and it is clearly a surprise as she makes the comments at her arrival into the apartment on May 29, 2025, following the absence of any event or significant moment since she walked into the apartment in a frenzied state and started making a series of incoherent statements that she refused to elaborate upon, despite mentioning the serious aspect of calling the police, but for reasons unclear. The first kidnapping attempt lacks the requisite aspect of a threat of danger posed by the existence of untreated mental illness, which is why officers B. Hook, badge 80551, Nathan Morgan, badge 21887, and L. Martinez, a female officer at the scene moments after Banks makes her introductory statements, do not kidnap me, by claiming they are conducting a health check. Banks' statements about using my phone and having medication and mental illness does not equate to a danger to oneself or others under the Welfare and Institutions Code that the entity sought to kidnap under via fictitious authority as a targeting entity. This first attempt to kidnap includes the initial officers engaged in kidnapping that was committed moments after this first attempt, as Banks adds false and malicious allegations that she was physically attacked by me, which the Ontario Police are then able to rely upon with knowledge of its falsity due to the pattern of conduct that remains underway, including in their presence at the apartment on May 29, 2025. In order to commit kidnapping together as an entity that is abusing the existing laws in order to kidnap and defame in an effort to obstruct justice. The pattern of conduct is hereby underway as these moments before the kidnapping that finally occurred at or around 8:45 p.m. when I am placed inside C. Torres's vehicle against my will and absent consent following Banks's call to the police, as she alleges that she suffered a battery at my hands, which is what she lacked in the first attempt at summoning the police in order to commit a malicious act such as kidnapping under the Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 5150, appear sufficient. It is to be noted that the statements made by the officers and Banks in the podcast audio and on video are clearly confusing, as the entity struggles to reconcile the abrupt and unexpected presence of the police inside Banks's apartment in the absence of any preceding event, and also struggle to answer my common sense questions pertaining to the purpose of their presence in the apartment. Give due attention to the comments made by the officers and Banks, as it reveals the jumbled and spontaneous nature of the incident in an effort to manufacture an arrest, which is kidnapping, upon the pattern of conduct. Lacking substantive support because the entity fabricated the information with knowledge that the ongoing incriminating documentation of the entity, which is the P.O.C., including the Ontario Police Department that is heavily engaged in targeting, as the evidence shows, reveals public corruption by the police department, and Tracy Banks as well, including Jason Isaac Fields, who maintain a criminal means of secretly exercising control over property that belongs to me, as Banks is engaged in also fraudulently acquiring a defamatory device that the entity aids in providing, such as a conservatorship or a power of attorney, something of the like. And Jason Fields, who is Banks's partner, accomplished through criminal means a fraudulent marriage to myself that I did not know anything about, nor did I ever agree to. Banks and Fields acquired these criminal means of stealing property from me, and exercising control over my life circumstances on paper, secretly, without my knowledge or involvement. And this is while the state is criminally monitoring me, and I remain subject to repeated kidnappings from 2019 to 2025, the latest being May 29, 2025. And I also suffer theft of property that Fields and Banks have not relinquished nor admitted to stealing via defamation and fraud, as I am being gang-stalked and remaining in an oppressed state. Criminal monitoring is intended to create an illusion of mental illness. However, this is not effective, nor is it creating any illusion of nor actual existence of mental illness in my circumstance. Moreover, Banks's and the Ontario Police's engagement in kidnapping via abuse of the Welfare and Institutions Code substantially fails in establishing the existence of mental illness in any regard, as the evidence shows that the targeting entity merely engages in using defamatory epithets that bear no actual significance with regard to the actual character, reputation, and mind state, particularly when the information is manufactured, as well as when it lacks any corroborating evidence to support the malicious assertions, which is what happened in this case. This is within the pattern of conduct committed with the intent to criminally defame upon exposing unprecedented criminal conduct by the government in Ontario, California, and throughout the state of California that is engaged in a comprehensive system of criminal surveillance, monitoring. And the evidence of the criminal system also directly rebuts the hollow and baseless calumny that the Ontario Police and Tracy Banks, including the entity remaining at Woodside Senior Apartments, relies on in a feckless and unsuccessful effort to seek to render tangible, probative evidence as illegitimate solely because of the defamation tactics of the entity that does not touch on the evidence itself. Furthermore, Banks seeks to personally profit from defaming me, as does Jason Isaac Fields. And this is in furtherance of kidnapping committed as a targeting entity in an effort to steal property that rightfully belongs to me, in order that she and Fields as well, engaging in what is the criminal acquisition of a fraudulent marriage to me outside of my knowledge, seeking to misrepresent themselves as one being in a role as a spouse, and Tracy Banks seeking to represent herself as one in a role as a trusted fiduciary, which neither are either of that. Tracy Banks has proven that she is not, especially since I am not an actual subject in a conservatorship or subject to anyone's use of power of attorney, nor am I anyone's spouse, and nor am I in any position where I cannot represent myself or fully function as an intelligent, independent, and knowledgeable adult, a person as I have my entire adult life. Banks has accomplished this method of defaming me without my involvement, knowledge, or consent, secretly and illegally, via the corruption of the state that is aiding and criminally monitoring me while seeking to defame me in order to steal via defamation, and fraud, which is a corrupt and criminal act committed by her as an entity that is targeting in order to defame as well. This is why the police and the hospital, San Bernardino County Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, are engaged in the criminal pattern of conduct at the facility where I was illegally detained by the entity that is maliciously targeting via the corrupt practices of those in the medical profession. The failure to create an actual mental illness by virtue of kidnapping alone is nevertheless harmful, as the entity merely creates an association with you on paper and thereby manufactures a patient-doctor relationship where there is none, and when targeting is underway, and it is the product of kidnapping through the abuse of the existing laws by a corrupt entity. It is libelous conduct, and it is procured through the criminal activity of the entity that is captured in the following audio and video on May 29, 2025, where the targeting entity acts together with intent to commit kidnapping in order to unlawfully evict me from Banks's apartment, detain me at the Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, and devise a mental illness condition out of no facts or circumstances supporting it, pursuant to the Welfare and Institutions Code that does not provide a basis for the detention that the entity committed, nor any grounds for mental illness at any level, including one that creates a danger to oneself or others under Section 5150, as the entity attempted to concoct by corrupt, gang-stalking police officers of the Ontario Police Department in concert with the medical workers of the Arrowhead Regional Medical Center that is engaged in the state's criminal pattern of conduct of federal group stalking and monitoring, gang stalking, and engaged in kidnapping as an entity with intent to obstruct justice, and it requires federal prison as a matter of justice in response. The following excerpt begins at 7:23, which is the point at which Tracee Banks enters the apartment, and the entity begins its first attempt at kidnapping. And I immediately transition into video, which you will also be able to view as the podcast. The video is converted into audio, so you can listen to the entirety of it via podcast, but there is a visual. I converted to video in order to capture video documentation of the kidnapping attempt that is visible for purposes of documentation and prosecution, captured on the same night. So I immediately transfer from audio documentation into video documentation, which are both capable of being viewed on the website. All right, it's 7:23 p.m. The entity that is monitoring is referring to itself, while Tracee is talking about P.O.C. and then referencing the gang stalker with the Ontario Police, Linda Reyes, stating that they're upset about my videos, which referring to that which you would not know by merely being in possession of your phone, but for paying attention, very close attention, which you know that they are because they're gang stalking under the fake sun over the apartment complex. And Tracee Banks is walking in monitoring. She's pacing into the apartments and referring to gang's third party Linda Reyes, which is Avanath Capital Management, that's been monitoring the whole time, engaging in psychological torture, and stating that Linda Reyes is upset about your videos. And then Tracee refers to P.O.C. Your P.O.C. videos, you know what I'm talking about. And I said, oh, Linda Reyes said P.O.C. Why would Linda Reyes use that term? No, she didn't. I said it. You know what I'm talking about. Your videos. This is the entity that's monitoring together and is engaging in what is, again, a UPS delivery. Nobody speaking to me, driving by on the motorcycle, on the vehicles. The entity is engaging in what is focusing while I'm in the parking lot and in custody of my phone and looking at the sky space. And the entity is sitting around monitoring, but that's speaking to, again, what you are looking at, the superficial veil of the demons that are engaging what is gang stalking, not having to talk to you, not having to refer to you, not having to say anything while you're not in violation of the law either, because I'm holding my phone, and the entity is also in custody of their phone, and there's no assumption about P.O.C. video documentation being recorded. There's also no conversation of that, and there is the mysterious hostility that is coming from Tracee Banks, but it's not mysterious, it's P.O.C. 7:25 p.m.
Erica, you
Yeah.
need to get dressed.
For what?
You need to get dressed.
For what?
The police is coming. You need to get dressed.
Why are the police coming?
You need to get dressed.
Why are the police coming?
You need to get dressed.
Why are the police coming? Are they coming like they were coming for the 7th?
Go to the hospital, that's why.
And going to the hospital for what?
Yes, you are.
For what?
You need a medical evaluation because nobody do what you do.
What is it that I'm doing?
You knew that living with me, I asked you to stay in the house.
So how are we getting to a medical evaluation? I need a medical evaluation because I'm not staying in the house?
You're filming people, Erica.
Who am I filming?
Strangers.
Who are the strangers that I'm filming?
Website? I'll pull it up. YouTube.
Who are the strangers that I'm filming?
I'm not answering that. You know exactly what's happening.
Wait, what are you talking about medical evaluation?
They pull you out of here and that.
So the police, you're talking about Ontario police, right? The Ontario Police Department? You opening and closing the door? Are you looking for them?
They're coming. We need to get dressed.
The Ontario Police, that was all over the place. So wait, Ontario Police Department are coming and I need a medical examination and what else? Why? You just came home from work and you're throwing all this stuff out. What happened? What happened?
Erica.
Yeah.
Get up and get dressed.
Why are you talking about the police and what's happening?
Get dressed.
Who comes home talking about police medical examination and you have no explanation? You're just saying get up and get dressed out of what?
I do have it.
What is it?
I do have it. But I'm
what
not
is
explaining it to you.
But you're talking to me about it and you're threatening the police, but you're not talking about what is going on. What happened? What happened before this right now? Are you looking for somebody out the door? You keep opening and closing the door. Is everything okay?
Get dressed.
For what?
Erica, they're going to take you out of here.
Who is they?
The police. I just.
Why?
Because you are causing havoc here.
How am I doing that? You just walked in the apartment. What havoc?
No.
What havoc?
You have been filming people.
Who's the people?
Every day
Who
you
is
go
the
out
people?
and you film people.
Where did I go out and film yesterday?
What do you mean yesterday? It's every day.
You just said every day. What did I film yesterday?
Every day.
What did I film yesterday?
Whatever you film, Erica. I don't want to
So wait,
talk
you don't
about
even know
this.
what you're talking?
I'm not going to go back and forth.
So you're just pointing out stuff that's not actually happening?
Get dressed.
Who did I film yesterday?
Get dressed.
Was it Linda that you're talking about that I filmed?
Get dressed.
I filmed Linda yesterday?
Get dressed.
Is that why the police are coming for what happened yesterday?
Get dressed.
Who called the police?
Get dressed.
So you don't have an explanation. You're just referring to the police. You're just making up information about calling the police on your daughter and stating havoc, stating every day, but nothing talking specifically about what's happening every day. And you're going out the front door the third time, opening and closing it again. Everything okay? Are you sure you don't need a medical examination?
Get dressed. Get dressed.
For what?
Get dressed.
For what?
They're coming to take you to
Who is they?
The police. I done told you 5 times.
Who called the police?
Don't worry about who called them. Get dressed.
Wait, who called the police?
Get dressed.
Called the police for what?
Get dressed. Hello?
This is the people of the state calling on the phone.
Hello?
And this is the entity engaging in criminal summoning. Doing the exact same thing with the same police that are gang stalking under this fake sun that was over UPS and the people of the state that's published on the venue of the internet as of 7:28 p.m. This is a kidnapping by the entity and threatening to engage in kidnapping by the Ontario police, Mike Lorenz, that are gang stalking. That's who she's referring to. This is P.O.C. This is why, again, Jason Isaac Fields, this is her sex partner, monitoring together, referencing a co-defendant, Linda Reyes, gang stalker with the Ontario police, and incapable of explaining what actually happened. She just walks into the apartment talking about, you're capturing strangers. This is the entity that is, again, engaging in the pattern of conduct in a malicious manner, and they are failing at their own game with regard to gang stalking happening within the imagination of the target individual, and in their universe, in their alternate universe where nothing is happening, it's all in your imagination. What is it that you're alleging is happening when I'm standing outside, not talking to anybody and not putting my phone in anybody's face, not speaking with anyone, and you're calling the police and not telling me why you're calling the police, doesn't want to say who called the police, doesn't want to say why the police are showing up, can't describe on what's happening every day, what happened yesterday. As you'll see the documentation, there was nothing published in video yesterday. The entity is gang stalking, and the entity is hostile to the documentation about them. Remember, it's on X today, it's on Twitter, it's on TikTok, it's on what is YouTube, and the entity is seeking to suppress the evidence. It was only on YouTube and being suppressed on YouTube. So the entity is very much in a frenzy while it is being exposed, being published online, and this is the U.S. government's pattern of conduct. The entity is TRACEE Banks, license 98UZ740. Hello.
Hello. How you doing today?
I don't know. Who are you?
My name is Nathan Morgan.
How can I help you, Nathan? What's your badge number?
21887.
21887?
Yep.
Why are you here?
We got a call about you. We're just trying
From
to check
who?
and make sure you're okay.
I'm perfectly fine. You arrived out of nowhere though, so she didn't want to say why the police are coming. So she just walks into the apartment and says the police are coming. So do you want to tell me why you're here?
We got a call about you
From who?
from your mom.
About what? She wasn't here. She just walked in. So why did she call you?
She's worried about you.
So, okay, so why is it that she can't communicate and you come in here? Are you supposed to be threatening me by speaking on her behalf?
How am I threatening?
Because you
I
represent
came
law
in here.
enforcement, so why is she calling the
How
police?
does that make me threatening?
Because
I
you
said
represent
I'm
law
here to help
enforcement. It's very threatening under the circumstances, especially
you.
when
Under
she
what
is
circumstances?
under the circumstances of making allegations that she doesn't want to expound upon. You're calling the police why? She doesn't say. They're coming to get you why? And why do you have some jurisdiction to come get me for what?
Who said I was here to come get you?
She did.
Okay, did I tell you I was here to come
But
get you?
she said that. So why is
Did
she
I
calling
tell
here?
you that?
No, you did not say that, sir. But I'm saying, why is she stating that? Stating about what you're going to do, and she's not speaking while you're in her
I'm
presence.
not sure what happened before I
So,
got
but you're
here.
in her apartment right now, so I want you to explain why were you called? Who she called you here,
Because
right?
she's worried about
So
you, like
if she
I've
called
already
you
said.
here, why didn't you tell me that you called them?
I did.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I
No, you
did.
didn't. And this is why you document the liars. And so, what is it? She called you here, and what did she tell you you were calling here? You were called here for?
She's worried about you.
About what?
That you haven't been taking your medication.
I don't take medication. So who told you that?
Well, I've only talked to one other person, so I'm pretty sure you can.
So you can
figure
just
out.
answer the question directly. She told you that I take medication?
There you go.
Okay, well that's a lie. And what
I
else?
didn't say that.
Oh, so now you guys are lying on each other in the present. So she didn't tell you that I take medication? Because you just said that she did.
I told you we got a call about you not.
And
taking
then you
medication.
also said that I didn't take my medication.
Like I said,
She told you that I take medication, right?
No.
So who told you that I take medication, sir?
That's what was in my call.
That's what was in your call that she made to you, right?
Not to me.
To your department?
Yes.
Okay, so you were called by Tracy Banks. You're stating that you were told in the call by Tracy Banks that I didn't take my medication. She's been outside of the apartment as until the current time is 7:32 p.m. She walks in the apartment less than 10 minutes ago, and you arrive after her referring to non-existent medication when she's the one that made the call.
That's why I'm trying to have a conversation.
And so
with
how
you
would
so
she,
you can
first of all,
explain
there
it.
is no medication. I don't take
So
it.
explain it to me.
So no, I don't owe anything to you.
Okay,
You're
then I
here
can only
on
take her side of the
false
story
premise,
if you
but
want
you're
to
here
talk.
based on a false premise, which is a communication of a threat again, when you're
It's
stating why
not
is it
threat.
threatening and you're referring to medication. So you want an encounter
How is me saying that I was?
because you're
told you
referring
haven't
to
taken
things
your
that are
medication?
farcical. That's why.
How is that a
That are
threat?
false. She's calling the police. You're
Police
talking
don't
about
just get
medication that
called
doesn't
for
exist.
threats.
Both of you are confused about what the conversation consisted
Well,
of.
then tell me about it so I can.
What do I
can
need to tell you?
understand.
She called you.
Well, if you're saying it's false, tell me your side so I can understand.
What is? I don't have a side. She called you.
So everything.
Talk
she's
to her
saying
about
is
why
true.
she called you here.
I did talk to her, but you're saying everything you told to me was a lie. So I can't understand.
Everything I told you?
You're not listening.
No, I'm listening very well. I just
Apparently
went
not.
through how all the inconsistencies that just happened right now.
No, you're not listening.
Yes, I am. So you can falsely depict what's going on right here, but it doesn't
Well, then
make sense
don't
why
you
you're here in
talk
my
to me
face.
So I can
It doesn't
understand
make
the
sense
truth?
why you're here in my face.
I already explained it to you.
No, you didn't. You said basically
You
that's
said
not
a
an
lie.
explanation under the law. She let you in her apartment under some false pretense, and so you get to be in my face harassing me and making
I'm
up
not
stuff
in
about
your face harassing you.
defamatory false information that I take
I'm not in
medication
your
that I
face
don't take.
harassing you.
So, excuse me?
I'm not
This
in
is
your face
harassment for her to
harassing
call the police for no reason. Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
And for you to be in here talking about medication, which she knows that I don't take, and then she's going to
Then
deny it in
explain
your
to me
face.
what's going on.
And so she calls the Ontario Police Department, very heavily documented in Ontario, by the way, and referring to things that don't exist, such as medication. What medication do I
Then
take, Tracy?
explain it to me.
What medication? What HIPAA information do you have about me taking medication? What medication were you told that I take,
I wasn't
officer?
told any medication.
You reference medication.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I was told a name
Why are you bringing it up in the first place?
because you asked why I was here.
Right, and you brought it up. So where are you going with that?
I explained it. You're the one that's not comprehending.
No,
what I'm
that's
saying.
not the one. Listen, you can insult me. You're the one that doesn't have a basis under the law to be here.
I do.
Bringing
I was
up things.
called
No,
to
you
be here.
don't. Being called to be here, and under some false pretense is not within your job description.
It actually
No,
is.
it's not. To harass other people, no, it's not.
I'm not harassing.
So yes, you are. That is harassment.
No, it's
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So what medication were you referring to him about, Tracy? Was it your medication? What HIPAA information you got about me that I'm taking medication? Why would he be referring to that?
Are you thinking about hurting yourself at all?
It's currently 7:35 p.m. This is audible activity.
Are you thinking about hurting yourself at all?
Why would you ask me that?
Because I'm asking a question.
What's your name again?
I already told it
She's
to
been
you.
here a few months.
N. Morgan? Okay. What was that? You can't get me to leave? Since when did you ask me to leave?
I said get help.
Get help for what?
Your mental illness.
What mental illness? What mental illness? Which one? What's it called?
Why are you laying on
What's
the
it
couch?
called?
You can't
What does that have to do with mental illness?
Because you can't take care of yourself.
What high school education did you get information about mental illness?
Your
No,
insults
you're the one that's insulting with naming medication that this officer has no details about. You're referring to, that's criminal defamation. And then you're talking about mental illness, just throwing it out there while you call the Ontario Police Department, who are inside of her apartment complex. She has a record for what? For what?
Like 8 months, I believe, before they released her. But
She's
they
referring
forced
to the
medication
entity
on
that engaged in kidnapping. Jason Knighton, Jonathan Burnett, the same department that pulled out his cell phone, playing back the conversation inside of this apartment. She's referencing Jonathan Burnett, who is engaging in what is kidnapping, and that's what she's referring to right now when she's saying I have a record. This is criminal defamation as well.
When she got out, she was raped.
And now she's saying I was raped. I was never raped, and they're sitting here like I'm not here, like I'm not speaking for myself. I'm a full-grown adult woman. This is not how you engage in an eviction. Engaging in what is fraternizing. You're sitting here talking. Excuse me, officer, what's your name?
I'm having a conversation with
Yeah,
her.
you're talking about me like I'm not an adult. Why are you hostile? Are you upset about something? Are you here to help or are you here to harass? Are you here to harass or?
But they have more resources to deal with actually.
Okay, let me get, this is B
fit our
hook
criteria.
number 80551. This is P.O.C.
As far as a law enforcement thing.
And this is, I want to be clear, she did the same thing with Officer Cho and Officer Kessel with Eric Spencer, Tommy Allen Banks on August 6, 2020, engaged in kidnapping, and doing so while they're engaging in what is criminal defamation upon criminal summoning. She's putting out, oh, you're mentally ill, putting out that you have medication, calling out, oh, you don't have any more explanation about the medication that Tracee Banks told you I'm on? No more information about that? That's P.O.C. And this is the entity that does so pursuant to what is an effort to try to criminally defame based on the evidence that's published on the video of the internet. Okay? You're not, no, it's not. No, it's not. How often are you called here? How often have you been called here?
This is the first time.
Okay, so why is she saying it's a daily thing?
So you're saying I'm in your face and harassing you?
You are in my face. You represent law enforcement. No. You represent law enforcement. You're in my face talking about medication that I don't take. You were standing right in my presence. She's sitting here lying about a criminal record that doesn't exist. She's sitting here defaming me with two people that represent law enforcement about things that have not happened. Under no circumstances, there has not been any interaction. She walked into the apartment and she immediately says that the police are coming after nothing happened, nothing precipitated it. And this is the same Ontario police that you see flying over me in helicopters right at this apartment. They're here engaging in criminal summoning via badge number 80551. This is federal prison. They're both going to federal prison. This is P.O.C. And this is why the entity is being published on Twitter, on X, being published on not Facebook, but YouTube, and now being published on TikTok as well. This is the entity responding with criminal summoning. Tracee license 9HUZ740. The demons in units 33 through 64, monitoring with her, engaging in federal stalking altogether, and engaging what is criminal summoning. That's what this is. They're fully engaged in what is a conversation, and they're engaged in monitoring at the same time. So Tracee Banks engaging in what is referring, what he stated in the podcast, which you'll hear, talking about medication. This is a means to try to render illegitimate the documentation about federal stalking that the Ontario Police Department is engaging in. All right, they engaged in the June 16, 2022 kidnapping. They engaged in what is the kidnapping on January 3rd, 2020. They engaged in the kidnapping and criminal defamation as a department that I'm documenting on the P.O.C. website, and the entity is seeking to engage in what is a means of harassment. What's your badge number, ma'am? Ma'am? You're here to monitor, but you don't want to speak to me? You got out of vehicle 1118, right? License 1697625. Alrighty, this is P.O.C. This is the entity, this is the response pushing the documentation. This is the entity that's repeatedly engaged in kidnapping and doing so via state actors like Thomas Garza. That's a judge, the entity engaged in surveillance and obstruction of justice, Thomas Garza. The entity that's engaging in what is the pattern of conduct. And I want to be clear, not talking to me. I'm over 18, engaging criminally defaming me in my presence, like I'm not competent, like I cannot communicate myself, and you hear me clearly articulating, ignoring. And when they're asked questions, they don't want to give a logical answer.
Is that legal advice? Because it's not proper. That's not proper legal advice, and this is not how you engage in what is some sort of hijacking means to try to kidnap like Officer Cho did? You call the Ontario Fire Department and AMR?
Right, thank you guys.
This, all she did was call the police, and I want to be clear, calling the police is in air quotes. She comes home, walks in, and calls the entity immediately. And upon engaging what is criminal defamation with the Ontario Police Department, and all three of them are going to federal prison, and this is pursuant to criminal defamation.
Go back in.
Now you want me to go back in? Hold on, I'm documenting. This is P.O.C. This is criminal defamation with the same entity. That's P.O.C. Vehicle number 1105 and vehicle 1118. And this is the entity that's engaging the P.O.C. when you're publishing the documentation on the venue of the internet, criminally defaming as an entity together. Stop touching me. That's a battery. Stop touching me.
Go back in.
That's a battery. She's
in.
breaking the law right here, officers. Why don't you call her? Why don't you come take her away? She's putting her hands on me, and that's a battery. That's a battery. Why don't you check her mental illness while you're here criminally defaming me? Because I'm going to disband the Ontario Police Department. That's what's happening. You're not intimidating me at all. You know that you're published on the venue of the internet, and you are going to be disbanded for this here, right here. This is exactly why. You have no authority under the law. Tracee Banks is getting locked up as well. Trying to defame me does not render the evidence against you illegitimate. You're stalkers as a whole department. She just put her hands on me. She put her hands on me. And you're the one defaming me. Why are you even here? You're here pursuant to criminal summoning. That's the pattern of conduct. You're criminals, and it's going all over the internet, and this is not going to stop that. That's P.O.C. You are the mentally ill psychopaths that you're looking like. Somebody that's abiding by the law and enforcing my rights. Enforcing my rights. That's P.O.C. No, I don't think so. You put your hands on me. That's not a nervous breakdown. That's somebody that's engaging in a battery, violating my rights. You're all violating my rights. All of you. Nobody pays attention when she put her hands on me, but if I touched her, you would have already tried to pull me out of this apartment. You're all engaging in that pattern of conduct together. Huddled around in a circle doesn't make you look any less guilty. It is the pattern of conduct, and you're going to prison. You're going to prison. That's P.O.C. It's currently 7:43 p.m. Look at the United States government's P.O.C. This is what they engage in when you document. This is what they engage in. This is a show of aggression. This is a show of force. While they're engaging in that pattern of conduct that's published on X, it's published on YouTube, and it's published on what is Spotify, on podcast. This is the same one you see gang stalking with the Ontario Police by helicopter on an ongoing basis. License 98UZ740 at Avanath Capital Management, Alvarado, Woodside Senior Apartments. This is P.O.C. This is what LAPD is doing in Los Angeles in the same exact specific environment, engaging in a criminal act while the entity is ignoring me, and they're here monitoring me with Tracee Banks. With Tracee Banks. Do not forget that. The Ontario Police Department is engaged in gang stalking by helicopter and as a whole entire. Mike Lorenz is going to be removed from position. This is P.O.C. This is Mike Lorenz's criminal conduct. This is an unlawful threat. He's going to federal prison. That's what you're getting. Mike Lorenz is going to federal prison. That's a battery putting your hand on me. That's P.O.C. Being documented, and it's going on the internet. Mike Lorenz is going to federal prison. Mike Lorenz is going to federal prison. No, you're not going to intimidate and threaten me and call the police because I'm documenting you. You're getting locked up, and so is Mike Lorenz. Threatening me while I'm documenting you. Talking about the P.O.C. Don't nobody know about the P.O.C. if you're not gang stalking, you demon. All of you. That's P.O.C. It is currently 7:44 p.m. This is the entity that resorts to such tactics now, wants to usher me and keep me in the house when she was trying to engage and threatening me through the police who are stalking in the path with light, monitoring right now in the specific environment where the fake sun rises and sets. Those are the demons of the Ontario Police Department, and Tracee committing a battery in their presence, and they are disregarding it. They have no authority to come and take me out of this apartment. Tracee Banks engaged in kidnapping via the Ontario Police on August 6, 2019 with Tommy Allen Banks and Eric Corey Spencer at the same venue with Officer Cho and Officer Kessel under the fake sun. They are aware of what was published on the internet today. Those officers are going to federal prison, and Mike Lorenz is going to be federally prosecuted. That's the pattern of conduct. The entity engages in what is a threat to kidnap. That's what this is that's what this is about. And these minions in these apartment buildings, who you see stalking under the fake sun, they're going to federal prison as well. They share in the elements of monitoring, and then while they're committing a kidnapping, they do it through the corrupt police departments. And that was supposed to be something that's supposed to intimidate, that's supposed to incite fear, that's supposed to cause you to be falsely depicted as mentally ill. The evidence speaks for itself. The arrival of the police, just like on May 16, 2025, where the fake sun is right here, the same day that I'm exposing corrupt law enforcement agencies, they demonstrate their demon possession and their corruption as an agency, just like right now, by gang stalking by helicopter. That's the pattern of conduct. Tracee Banks is a state actor. She's a third party, and she's an unintelligent one. You will hear on the podcast when she's referring to medication that I don't take, when she is, and you have this demon, this puppet that's wearing a license talking about things that do not apply. That's a desperate act trying to defame. They're doing this after years of consistent evidence. That's the desperation of the entity that's being documented. This is Jason Field's criminal conduct. The entity is hostile while my evidence is on more than one platform. There is no investigation when the entity is engaging in what is threatening to kidnap you. The federal government is not engaged in investigating anything. The Ontario Police Department is going to be disbanded. That's exactly why. Mike Lorenz specifically, that's a federal prosecution. It is currently 7:46. I just want to be clear. It's going from what is a disbanding, it's going to federal prison for the gang stalking police officers, to what is an individualized specific prosecution of the domestic terrorist, the chief of police, Mike Lorenz himself, while those demons representing that corrupt department engaging in state surveillance, and I publish it on the internet, and the demons that are on more than one platform now. I'm on TikTok, I'm on X now, as of yesterday, May 28, 2025, and Tracee Banks enters the apartment. I'm on Amazon shopping, and this demon creates an episode out of nothing. Out of nothing, and the police arrive immediately after she arrives. This is based on the documentation and an effort to try to, it does not work. It does not work. It does not make the documentation illegitimate. It will never supersede the evidence of the P.O.C. Ever. You are always going to look at the specific environment. You're always going to look at the entity that's engaging in kidnapping, manufacturing charges, making up information. You can't even ask them, where did you get this information about medication? Where did you get this information about what is a criminal record? She's talking about a kidnapping by Jonathan Burnett, who's going to federal prison, who pulled out his cell phone pursuant to surveillance at the Ontario police, who just arrived here pursuant to criminal summoning. Jonathan Burnett pulled out his cell phone and replayed a conversation inside of this apartment. That's who she's talking about, a criminal record. And that's supposed to, again, render illegitimate while she's standing in their presence gang stalking. This is the P.O.C. It's currently 7:48 p.m. This is the entity engaging in criminal summoning. That's P.O.C. That's the P.O.C. I want to be clear, gang stalking and targeting with the Ontario police because you're published on the internet as a sex offender and as a stalker. All right? This is the entity that's targeting with the Ontario Police Department and doing so with impunity. Don't touch my property, because if I throw yours, you're going to call the police. Now, if I do, you're going to call the police because you're the one that's scared. The entity's engaging in this because she's published as a sex offender and as a gang stalker and calling the police because she is published on the internet as a demon and as a gang stalker. That's what this is about. Calling the police does not intimidate. Calling the police does not render illegitimate the evidence, and she is going to a mental asylum. She does this every week, referring to the Ontario police when she's gang stalking me inside of this apartment. She does the exact same thing. April 17th, April 14th, when I'm in here minding my business, and she's gang stalking. She's a hostile demon doing the exact same thing, calling the Ontario Police Department here, and while they're engaging in it with her. This is P.O.C. And I want to be clear, everywhere that I go, she is still gang stalking. This is a psychopath. That's a demon targeting as an entity, and she's still gang stalking even when I leave the apartment. This is what's going on in Los Angeles at Alvarado Gardens. This is what's going on in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is what's going on when I'm in Hesperia at the Holiday Inn. This is what's going on when I'm in what is Victorville at the Holiday Inn, when I'm in Monrovia at the Courtyard by Marriott. The entity is engaging in that P.O.C. and she's still acting as one entity. This is a psychopath who's hostile because she's being documented. That's P.O.C. The people in the state are always on her communication device while she's engaging in that pattern of conduct together. All right, this is P.O.C. It's currently 7:49 p.m. This is the entity that's engaging in what is the desperate acts of criminal acts of obstruction of justice while you are published and exposed as a demon and as a gang stalker, targeting your own daughter, which is why you're going to a mental asylum. That's exactly why. Okay, the evidence is on X today, the evidence is on YouTube, and the demons engaged in what is a frenzy, engaged in an act of obsession, engaged in an act of desperation with regard to trying to threaten and intimidate. So this is the entity that's engaging in that P.O.C. because of hostility toward being documented. This is P.O.C. It's currently 7:50 p.m.
Let's go. Come on.
And this is after calling the police. The police are not going to come and yank you out of the apartment. That's not how you engage in what is an eviction. Neither is this. But this is the entity that's gang stalking. And it's because of the evidence that's online. While she's referring to Linda Reyes is going to federal prison. Linda Reyes is under the fake son gang stalker with the Ontario police. Look at May 8, 2025 under the fake son that's over at 8:49 a.m. and it's still here like I documented in the afternoon at 3:39 p.m. where the same people of the state, including Linda Reyes that she's referring to, are under that fake son engaging in monitoring. And pursuant to that criminal monitoring that's online as well, and I publish it onto 2 other platforms, this is where the Ontario police, who are heavily documented gang stalking, arrive pursuant to criminal summoning. And none of that renders the evidence illegitimate. You will never forget the record. This is the entity that engages in these tactics when you expose them. And these are the maniacal, psychopathic sex offenders who are gang stalking in California. This is P.O.C. License 9HUZ740. Federal stalking the people of the state on her communication device. And don't forget what the entity is doing on an ongoing basis. Every time she's pacing, she's always got a demon on the phone, on her ear, helping her, engaging in what is her act of cowardice, a scared demon, in other words. Always has to have somebody helping her. This is P.O.C. It's 7:51 p.m.
The entity engaged in federal group stalking and monitoring does so in the effort to criminally defame by targeting another as an entity in manners and methods that defy the natural environment and are thus uncommon to describe because they are demonic. And this is intended to create the illusion of mental illness being the cause of the allegations of the ordinary targeted individual who lacks the ability to communicate what they are subject to and who is responsible for it, as they themselves may be frightened and confused. This is a malicious pattern of conduct that inflicts ceaseless psychological torture, which manifests as a mental health issue. It masquerades as a mental health issue. It disguises itself. It may appear falsely as a mental health issue, suffered when it is the product of actually having been targeted by a malicious entity that intends to exploit genuine mental illness in order to manufacture the condition as the cause of concern. And this is in order to defame and detain against the will of a targeted individual. Just to provide some context regarding the entirety of the malice, the purpose of the level of malice that you're approached with when the entity is engaged in gang stalking, when the government is engaged in gang stalking, when the people of the state, the civilian population, is engaged in gang stalking. This is under the circumstances of the ordinary targeted individual. However, I have demonstrated and proven the reality of a pattern of conduct that is intended to harm socially, emotionally, and psychologically, if not physically, the targeted individual subject to the bullying system underway by a corrupt entity in concert with the civilian population, and it is not effective in terms of establishing mental illness, which is the purpose of the corrupt entity that is targeting me. The documentation proves that targeting is underway, firstly, and secondly, the ongoing system is not one that triggered the response that the entity anticipated, and which the ordinary target individual experiences, and is again demonstrated through the consistent body of evidence regarding the entity's pattern of conduct. Under the immediate circumstances, the entity is targeting me in doing so for age-old purposes that do include money and property that does not belong to the entity, and it does not belong to the treacherous third parties who have sought to profit from the defamatory campaign behind gang stalking someone who was not supposed to be able to prove it. That's the whole purpose of gang stalking. That's the whole purpose of engaging in what is demonic behaviors and being surrounded in a demonic environment where it is inexplicable and confusing and frightening and terrorizing and difficult, problematic to explain it to another person. That's the malice behind it. And in this case, I have proven gang stalking, and the entity is merely engaging in vacuous and corrupt efforts in the face of evidence that does not support its efforts to malign my character and render me nor the body of evidence as anything capable of merely being written off and disregarded as merely nonsensical or meaningless. The evidence is profound and groundbreaking. In addition, the entity seeking to defame is not only interested in this outcome because of the interest in stealing property, but because of the evidence that exposes the corrupt entity and the civilian population who harbor disgusting and wicked practices in order to target together as a corrupt entity. TRACEE Banks and Jason Fields, third parties, they are each motivated to keep me subject to criminal monitoring that they are engaging in ceaselessly with the entity in order to keep me in an oppressed state, such as my current situation, having been unlawfully evicted from TRACEE Banks' apartment. But even before that, when I am gainfully employed as a property manager in Los Angeles and I'm being gang stalked by the Los Angeles Police Department and the people of the state. And even before that, when I am practicing law in Los Angeles and I'm being targeted by the legal community, I'm being subject to systematic harassment, and I am not being given any sort of assistance from the people of the state who are the Human Resources Department. This is the pattern of conduct that is designed to interfere with your liberty right. And then the entity is engaging in what is using that to manufacture the inability to care for oneself. That's not mental illness, and that is malice. And that's the design of the system. And it is the desire, the goal of the entity to keep me in an oppressed state, and to continue with the state in acts of defamation and continuing to steal real, personal, and intellectual property from me. That's the whole purpose and the intention behind my remaining subject to the pattern of conduct, in order that the entity, TRACEE Banks, Jason Isaac Fields, as I remain subject to this system of gang stalking. They also refer to as a basis of mental illness, the fact that you're subject to gang stalking, or that the ordinary target individual alleges gang stalking. It is axiomatic that they assert the entity. It is common knowledge. It's just something that is automatically referred to as it being mental illness, and that is just not supported. It's also not logical. And in my case, that is not the situation whatsoever. The entity is merely just engaging in, like I stated, vacuous and meaningless defamatory epithets that have no substance. And it is the demonstration of high malice by the entity engaged in the pattern of conduct. Jason Isaac Fields and TRACEE Banks continue to steal from me. Neither have admitted to stealing from me via defamation, fraud, and criminally monitoring with the state, which is also why they are monitoring with the state as opposed to aiding in the prosecution of the state, because they intend to profit from my demise and are engaging in that voyeurism that I have documented, that I have described. As I continue documenting in order to enforce my rights against the state that is targeting you sits back and watches you. And that is the same for TRACEE Banks. That is the same for Jason Isaac Fields, who have engaged in criminal and fraudulent means requiring defamation in order to acquire things such as a fake marriage with me while I'm being gang stalked, what is a fraudulent and criminal means of a secret conservatorship while I'm being gang stalked, and there is no mental illness and there is no knowledge, consent, or involvement of myself in that whole process with the government, who happens to be engaged in what it is that I'm documenting and exposing, federal group stalking and monitoring, gang stalking. So the acts of targeting in order to acquire a fraudulent means of a conservatorship, it is a basis for federal prison, and it is the same for acquiring a fraudulent means of a secret marriage to me, which I know nothing about, while I remain oppressed by gang stalking and subject to repeated kidnappings that the entity then refers to in order to defame me and continue stealing, maintaining custody of my property as I remain targeted by the state. Fields and Banks are partners in acquiring such criminal and fraudulent devices of attaching themselves to me financially, and that's only on paper, in order to steal while they are criminally monitoring me with the state. This is the motive behind Banks' summoning the Ontario Police Department, and together they misrepresent the facts in order to accomplish an arrest, which is kidnapping, as they are engaged in criminal monitoring and a method of targeting by kidnapping in a hospital where I may be subject to criminal defamation, which is in furtherance of Banks' and Fields' purposes of unlawfully exercising control over property that belongs to me, where neither are in any lawful position especially as gang stalkers with the state, to feign under the law the role of a spouse through a fake marriage accomplished by gang stalking and defaming me, and feigning a legitimate conservatorship under the law accomplished by gang stalking, defaming me, and maintaining secrecy about the existence of the unlawful acts committed against me, while I am simultaneously being targeted by the entity, all of which is designed to secure my property and ultimate demise. The Arrowhead Regional Medical Center is engaged in targeting with the state, which is what I documented during the 2022 kidnapping from June 16, 2022 until June 21, 2022, where the same pattern of the entity that is targeting relies on the malicious assertions of the people of the state in order to commit a kidnapping as a targeting entity, using such assertions to conduct an illegal arrest, all while the pattern of conduct is underway and the people of the state are cooperating in a pattern of conduct with the police department. Here, it is the Ontario Police Department, just as it was in 2022, where the Arrowhead Regional Medical Center is documented as engaging in this pattern of kidnapping via criminal defamation. The Arrowhead Regional Medical Center maintains the specific environment where the pattern of conduct is also underway ceaselessly inside of a hospital that purports to be providing mental health services and a healing environment. But the hospital is actually engaged in ceaseless psychological torture via the maintenance of amplified audible activity day and night, impossible light activity inside of the facility, and pacing is underway under such circumstances by those who profess to be in the practice of medicine and healthcare services, all of which is malicious and psychologically harmful. It is the intentional engagement in the malicious pattern of conduct that the corrupt entity shares with the hospital that maintains the light source over that venue. Not an ordinary hospital anymore. It is a facilitating venue where the specific environment is identified. And this is that which I documented on video in 2022, and it remains the case during the kidnapping at the hospital committed in 2025. Just as is the case at every other venue where the pattern of conduct is ceaselessly underway. The hospital is not only corrupt as it is gang stalking as a hospital, but Arrowhead Regional Medical Center also engaged in egregious conduct, such as harassing me in an effort to trigger a reaction that the personnel did not get, which is their deplorable method of seeking to concoct a mental health disorder, which would merely be based on my reactions to their unprofessionalism, to their disrespect, and violation of the laws and policies that govern the facility, and not actually a mental health condition. However, it was ineffective. It is ineffective. It did not prosper. But this pattern of abuse was documented in grievances and did not provide the gang stalking personnel any material to penalize me with a fake diagnosis of a mental illness based on my reliance of the laws that require what none of the personnel had. Specific facts and circumstances that describe in detail what indicates mental illness that poses a danger to others or oneself pursuant to the Welfare and Institutions Code, specifically Section 5150, other than the fabrications of the Ontario Police Department and the third-party TRACEE banks, despite the hospital never having any good faith claim to assert probable cause to involuntarily detain me under the code in the first instance. Kidnapping in a hospital pursuant to gang stalking and lies proffered as to why does not make a mental illness condition. However, the engineer lighted the facility that created things such as shadows on the ceiling and double and triple shadows as the personnel walked around is evidence of the pattern of conduct during the course of not merely an improper detention, but a kidnapping, as the hospital engaged in the exact same P.O.C. with an effort to criminally defame as an entity with malice. The psychological torture tactics include the amplification of helicopter activity, sounding inside of the area where I remained, 1 BH North, as in 1 Behavioral Health North. For example, on May 31st, 2025 at 5:30 p.m., helicopter activity is amplified in volume inside of the unit following my submission of a grievance regarding poor treatment and improper threats by the personnel to detain me in the absence of mental illness and merely because I enforced my rights while in the hospital under the code, the Welfare and Institutions Code, which infuriated the personnel. Following my grievance submitted at 5:25 p.m., 5 minutes later, helicopter activity fills the unit, which is within the pattern of conduct intended to threaten and intimidate, especially during the course of a kidnapping via criminal defamation. At 8:05 p.m. on the same evening, helicopter activity is then amplified again inside of my room, 1906 1D352. And it is during a time when I am documenting Ontario Police. When in my room, and I'm recalling a time when the entity, the Ontario Police, stole my vehicle in 2019. And I did respond with a suit for conversion in the case called Erica Lorraine Spencer v. Bill and Wags. Immediately upon recalling this, amplified helicopter activity sounded inside of my room, which is within the same pattern of conduct of criminal monitoring that is ongoing in the specific environment that is maintained inside of that hospital and by the personnel and patients, including as I documented the entity while I remained kidnapped. It is also to be noted that the hospital is targeting, and this is also relevant to the misrepresentation of fact committed by the hospital in failing to formally advise at the point of admission on the night of May 29, 2025 at around 11:04 p.m. after the hospital blatantly disregarded statements that there was no violence and the assertions made against me were malicious. The entity violated the code in failing to provide the county patient's rights advocate contact information as well when I was detained involuntarily, despite malicious assertions that the hospital was informed of and clearly disregarded my statements. Monique Rubalcava, a registered nurse, she states in the written document, which is referred to as the involuntary detainment advisory, that she advised me as required under the law on the night of admission, which was May 29, 2025, and she did no such thing, neither orally nor provided a copy of the advisement, which I requested and was denied. And this is an express mandate under the Welfare and Institutions Code, and the hospital failed in this. And Rubalcava misrepresents fact in stating that she did advise me. This is the basis of the petition for the habeas corpus that I requested on May 30th, 2025. These details are relevant to the fact that the hospital is gang stalking and sought to defame me by detaining me unlawfully in concert with the state, and it is within a documented pattern of conduct.